I'm crazy about my next guest. We don't always agree, but he always has great information. You've been seeing the commercials run on, and even on some billboards, about the Amendment 1. Amendment 1, as Wirepoints says, if you care about property taxes, parents' rights, or union powers in the future of Illinois, you should care about Amendment 1. And I agree 100%. A referendum on Illinois' November 2022 ballot. Ted says it is one of the most important votes Illinoisans will take this election, and perhaps the most important in decades. But he says something else, and this is something that I didn't know. That's why I appreciate Ted Dabrowski so much. He says, important. Supporters of the amendment say the new rights and powers apply to both public and private sector workers. That's not true, he says. Private sector labor law is governed and preempted by federal law. The reality is the amendment's rights apply only to public sector workers. Ted Dabrowski, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Perry, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you. So tell us why, Ted, you think that this is so important, that this is an important referendum. Why are you putting it up there as one of the most important decisions Illinoisans will make ever, or maybe in decades?
Well, amendments to the Constitution are meant to be that, super, super important, right? The Constitution is what guides everything. And so if you ever stick something in the Constitution, it better be important and it better have an impact, and people better like it. And so if we do what's being proposed, and if Illinois vote for it, we will have transformed and locked in some real pain for Illinois. We're already in deep trouble in this state, as we all know. We've got massive problems with pensions. Our property taxes are the highest in the country. We're losing more people than any other state except for New York State. So we've got real big troubles. And so if we're going to stick this thing called, and I say called, workers' rights into the Constitution, we better know what's in it, and people better be sure that this is what they want.
So let me ask you this. It is my understanding that this is kind of a rebuttal to when Governor Rauner had a victory with the U.S. Supreme Court about union rights. And from what I heard, is that what this does, no matter what this referendum will do, that no matter if it's a Republican in an office or a Democrat or a Libertarian, that they cannot, once again, it will not be, this will make it so that the people that work for the state could unionize without being deterred to unionize. Tell me what I got right, what I got wrong.
Yeah, so that's partially right, partially wrong. So Governor Rauner was engaged in one thing called the Janus decision,
right? And
that went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And that was that when that Supreme Court ruled in favor of Janus, that meant that a public sector worker no longer had to be in the union as a condition of employment. In other words, it gave rights to public union workers, to government workers. They couldn't be forced to join the union anymore.
Right.
And so that was a big deal for the public sector. Now, in the private sector, though, that's another thing Rauner tried to do. He tried to do right to work. He tried to give the same kind of rights to private sector workers like public sector workers. In other words, he wanted Illinois not to force private sector workers to join a union as a condition of employment. And that's what the unions don't like. The private sector unions, of course, don't like that here. Now, you should know that Indiana is a right-to-work state, so that means they have worker freedom.
And that means what to me, seeing that I think that's probably one of the worst states in the union?
Well, no, but Indiana but there's more than half the states in the country have right to work, and every one of our neighbors is right to work except Missouri.
Okay.
So they're in right to work usually means you're more competitive. You attract more companies to come in. And that's what we need, right? If you talk about the South Side and South Cook.
Okay,
boy,
you're speaking of big corporations and that sort of thing. Listen, there's so many disparities, in my opinion, Ted, between the workers around this country and what the corporate. Look, they're not paying us what we're worth. They're not paying people what they are worth. And I'm not a proponent of workers' rights states. For me,
Perri,
that is a far-right conservative issue as far as I'm concerned. So I don't support it. But I want to talk about this with you.
But, Perri, let me just jump in right there.
Okay.
I just mentioned that Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, Kentucky, they're all our neighbors, right-to-work states. They're all growing in population. They're all attracting businesses. We are scaring them away, Perri. So you have to add that into the equation.
They don't have to pay what people deserve to make a living wage. That's why.
Those states are booming. They're growing far faster than we are, Perri.
But their wages aren't growing. Their wages aren't growing, Ted.
No, Perri, when you have jobs and you have growth and you have a growing population, all that, you grow. We are shrinking in Illinois. Our economy is shrinking. Our population is shrinking. So you have to be careful about, though. We can push out everybody, and nobody's going to have wages, or the wages are going to go down. So that's a big part of this thing. But and here's what's happened with this amendment. We're stuck on the wrong argument, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Even though we're talking about right to work. So this amendment would ban right to work. And you may like that, Perri, and other people may like that.
Yeah, right.
I just mentioned why it's a bad idea. We should not do that. By the way, it's against the law now. We're not a right-to-work state. The question for you is, do we need to put it in the Constitution? Because then we can't change it. And if you, Perri, ever change your mind or others change their mind, you can't change it. Why are we putting things like that in the Constitution? So that's number one. Number two, the real thing is the same language that's in there for all workers, which this amendment, what it does is it guarantees, puts in the Constitution the right to organize and bargain collectively. Mm-hmm. And that's just like the freedom of speech, freedom of religion. We're going to make that a right in the Constitution. Mm-hmm. Why we're putting in the Constitution? No reason to. But anyway, that's what it does. And so the workers would have those rights. And not only that, it's not just about negotiation over salaries and wages and hours and all that. It adds two additional components for workers. They can also bargain over their economic welfare. Now, again, that's a very broad term, but if a public sector worker can negotiate over their economic welfare, that can include all kinds of stuff. And it also gives them safety. So, one, they gain massive powers because they're put in the Constitution. Mm-hmm. Two, they gain new rights to bargain over their economic welfare and safety. And a very important part is the law, the amendment says, no laws shall be passed. So that means the legislature can't pass any laws that diminish or negate those powers. So how is the legislature going to legislate on lower property taxes or maybe less rights to the Chicago teachers unions? They won't be able to because they're blocked by the Constitution. So really what this amendment about is giving massive powers to the government unions and protecting them with no law shall be passed. And ordinary people won't have any powers vis-a-vis the government unions anymore. They won't be able to challenge like property taxes. They won't be able to challenge, hey, you're taking my parents' rights at schools, because the Constitution will protect them. And anything that's done to try to fix Illinois will be legislated in the courts.
All right, then let's go to the tax doctor, 773-591-1690. I'm going to make sure that you guys get the information for Wirepoints so you can go on there, scan the QR code so you can get more information about what we're talking about. I know for a lot of folks this is kind of confusing, especially since I would say the vast majority of our listeners have come from very strong union homes. Many of us would not have seen what it is to be in the black middle class had it not been for unions. There has been the population of unions are almost minuscule now as compared into the 1960s and 70s. What that means to you is one thing. What that means to someone else is something else. But I'm going to go to the tax doctor.
Perri, just real quick for an explanation. This amendment really doesn't do much for private sector
unions, right?
Private unions, right? Because that's all covered by the federal law. So people shouldn't think about this amendment as improving the benefits of private sector workers.
And that's a point well taken. Tax Doctor, you're on WVON.
How you doing, Perry? Great show, great topic.
Thank you.
First, let me make it perfectly clear. I come from a union family. I'm pro-union. My father was in the union. My mother, my brother. My mother was a union steward. My brother was a union steward, and I was a union steward.
Okay.
So we pro-union. But when it comes to Amendment 1, take the policy of labor people and put it into the Constitution. Mm-hmm. Once you put it in the Constitution, you can't change it.
Right.
Primary example, we have a pension crisis in our state. And when Pat Quinn was governor and they had floated House Bill 1 and Senate Bill 1 to try to fix the pension crisis, what happened?
Couldn't do it.
The retirees took them to court, and the Supreme Court ruled that you can't mess with this because it's codified into the Constitution. Mm-hmm. Same thing would be with workers' rights. But workers' rights is not the issue. Mm-hmm. The issue is Section 25, where it tells you that if something happened with labor policy, the General Assembly can't do nothing about it because they lose their rights to fix it. So that's why it's important for us not to have this stuff in the Constitution. Labor policy, folks, should be in the law, not the Constitution. And if we're going to save this state, we're going to have a constitutional amendment to fix the pension crisis.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. What did you want to say, Ted?
Well, I say amen to what the tax doctor said.
I knew you would.
Well, because he's right,
you know what? When you put it in the perspective, now let me just say this, of the Constitution, the state of Illinois' Constitution, the fact that we feel so voiceless anyway as Illinoisans, it makes sense. I'm kind of on the fence now, but I can tell you that makes sense. You have to be careful what you put into law. You have to be careful. I agree with you on that one.
Perry, I'll give you the example of powers. The Chicago Teachers Union, love them or hate them, they are probably the most powerful union in the country. And when they have power, that means the people have less power.
That's true.
Because that's the way it works. It's a power game. So they can strike anytime they want. They wanted to add affordable housing into their teachers' contract.
Right.
They could put defund the police, and there's a lot of opinions about defunding the police. But man, if you want policing and you want protection in the community, well, if the Chicago Teachers Union wants to defund the police and they stick that in the contract, you never know what they can do. And so that's what this amendment would do, would give them all these rights to negotiate all kinds of stuff about their safety and their economic welfare. And once it goes in the collective bargaining agreement, what are parents going to do? How do they fight back? Because they'd have to take on the Constitution. Well, as the tax doctor said, the only way you can fix what the problem is to go back to another amendment. And, that takes years or decades. So
let's try to get through these phone calls as quickly as possible because we have a lot of people on the line, and we've been talking to Ted Dabrowski, president of Wirepoints. Ted, once again, tell our listeners where they can get more information on your website or a phone number or whatever you have before we run out of time.
Thanks, Perry. So if you go to wirepoints.org, that's our website, wirepoints.org. And right there at the very top, you'll see a little red button that says Amendment 1. And we kind of break out the amendment language. We tell you what it means. We give you the arguments for it, the arguments against it, and things like that. So you can find a kind of comprehensive overview of the amendment.
All right, then. Let's go to Eddie Reed. Eddie, you're on WVON.
Hey, sister, how are you?
I'm good.
Let me move very quickly. We are against it. We vote no on it, and we organize the union. But let me just come at it this way. Anytime, you got to be very careful about taking away power of policy and legislative initiatives from the people.
Right.
You head toward tyranny when you go down that road. There is no law in this country that mandates unions. And you all say, take a look at the public sector unions. They may help people make more money in certain ways, but they make less money than all of the other private sector unions. One day I want to get with you and talk about the difference between a right-to-work state and a union state. There are 26 right-to-work states, but the gentleman has I won't try to get into the intricate parts of it, but this is a move toward a kind of tyranny. I know that's a harsh word, but we need to vote no on
I
this.
believe you. I believe you. And I can honestly say, Eddie, between you, the tax doctor, and Ted Dabrowski, Titus, we're voting no on the amendment, pretty much. Let's go to Don. Don, you're on WVON.
No, this is Ron Perri.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Ron.
Well, yeah, real quick. Absolutely no. The president of the AFL-CIO, Tim Dre, I believe, and he came out and made the statement, the amendment would protect workers' rights from ideological changes. Well, period. That's what happens in a democracy. Things change. Things change over time. So, no, that has been substituted. And then lastly, I wish I could have talked a little further because I have serious problems with these public unions. That's one of the reasons that the state, city, county got themselves in trouble when they were giving out these pensions that they can't afford. Contrast that with private sector. If General Motors, you starting to give out too much money on different things, and the consumer can't afford it, guess what? You go to Ford. See, I one time we need to have a discussion about that. And I'm probably biased because after working 40-some years, I was never in a union. But again, I had serious problems with public, because lastly, what they do, they vote for whoever guarantees them all the benefits and wages, but we're stuck with it.
Yeah.
See, we're stuck with it.
Well,
it's an incestuous relationship between the unions.
I can tell you one thing. I think people have had it up to here with the Chicago Teachers Union.
Absolutely, but guess what? We're paying for it. But we paying for the property tax. That's why I believe in choice in education also. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Don. Don, you're on WVON.
Good morning, Perry, and you've got another no vote here.
Okay.
In fact, a huge no vote. We can't continue creating protected classes to the point that we're going to put it in the Constitution. Realize who these workers work for. They work for us. We are trying to put in a constitutional amendment that says the managers, us, cannot control the union and the workers here. It is already a protected class, and it needs to be stopped and stopped right away. We cannot vote for this because there's no way of fixing it when it goes off the rails.
Thank you, Don. Let's go to Nwaji. Nwaji, you'll probably be my last caller on this. Go right ahead.
Okay, I plan to vote yes for the amendment.
Okay.
I'm looking at Section 25, and I've become very suspicious of these groups and people who have a good reputation in our community, and then they make some very poor political decisions and endorsements, like endorsing Rahm Emanuel and things like that. It's a lot of bad information out here, and there's a lot of money behind this bad information. And what I would want to know is, before I decide for sure, is who came up with the Workers' Right Amendment and what is behind the opposition to the Workers' Right Amendment. Because we listen to people a lot of times because of who they are.
Right.
And we don't read. You know, you have to read the amendment before you can make a decision and say, oh, I'm against it, because some voice that we hear all the time on the radio
says,
don't do it. I don't know these people.
Okay.
And what they say means nothing to me at all, and I feel like we keep getting fooled. It's like WVON has been a haven for these black moles. I'm not talking about anybody in particular, but there's so many people that call this station now and have programs on this station now, and
they have an agenda. They have an
right,
agenda,
and they're very good at what they do. It's like they've been trained. You know, it's not just some average person. They've been trained because they're just too good at what they do.
All right. Well, let me just tell you, you made some very cogent points, and thank you so much for that. Ted, you're going to have the last word. Tell us what would you like to leave our listeners?
I will tell you that I totally agree. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce her name, Mvaji, but I totally agree. Like, you know, we have an agenda. Everybody has an agenda, and everybody in the world has an agenda. What's key about what we do, and we put it up on wirepoints.org, we laid out the amendment language. We make the arguments. We show it to you. We like to show our data. So we love the challenges. People should just read, educate themselves, and that's really what our goal is. Everybody has to make their own decision, but they should know what they're deciding on. And like she said, they should know who's behind what, why, and et cetera. But go to wirepoints.org, go to our webpage there that says Amendment 1, and you can find some of the details, and then go elsewhere and find details and see who's telling you the truth.
All right, then, Ted, thank you so much. Give the website
Thank you, Perry.
Give the website.
Wirepoints.org, and click on the red button that says Amendment 1.
We're going to continue this discussion when we get closer to the election. Ted, thank you so much for all the work you do and being so generous with your time. Thank you. 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 Generous with your time. Thank you.